Hello and welcome to I guess, episode 1.5 of Ctrl-Alt-Access, which we are recording from GAConf.
Yeah.
This is the morning of day 2. How are you finding the conference so far?
I'm tired. It's been a long day, but it's been really good. So if anybody watching, this is the morning of the second day. So we don't have everything we can talk about. We absolutely talk about the first day, and then on a regular podcast episode, we can talk about the second day. It's been wonderful. I have learned so many things. I can't even start. But we had a really cool start of yesterday with a Disney game.
Yes, Disney,
Yeah.
Disney Illusion Island, yeah.
It was so impressive to see how, first of all, it's a game made in quite a short period, and see how they are able to make something so good and so accessible in this short amount of time. And he had this really cool, I can pop it up on the screen, but it's a really cool way of looking at it, how he said accessibility and family friendly, but also with these characters we all love, and how that they are going to make that combination, and how they made that into a game, and how accessibility was such an important topic for them. So yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, I think that Disney Illusion Island talk was particularly interesting in that the ways that they talked about approaching a family-friendly game license as something that needed to be approachable for all ages, and that sort of naturally led into accessibility, I think was really interesting. There's a lot of really good insights on stuff I've been aware for a while of the idea of coyote time, that if you jump slightly after you should have jumped on a jump, games will give you a little bit of grace period. I hadn't heard that there was a specific term for the opposite of that, you didn't quite land the jump, but it's sort of adapting on the other end. I really like the stuff they have to do with, hey, if you've managed to jump to a high platform and someone else needs a hand, you can drop a rope down to support them climbing back up.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is really cool is that they talked a bit about how family friendly needs to incorporate accessibility, because also the fact that it's many people's first game, which doesn't necessarily mean they need accessibility, but accessibility can help them as well. And there is this talk going on about a lot of game coming from consoles like Nintendo is not accessible, and I felt that this was a good showcase of how, yes, it can actually be done. And that was actually another thing we saw. We saw that there was this game Accessibility Association Japan is coming up in the news from Ian. That was really cool. Did not know that was a thing, and I think that shows that we are going to have a cultural change coming up.
Yeah, the Game Accessibility Association of Japan, I think, was literally about 2 weeks before this conference, so maybe 3 weeks ago by the time you're seeing this, and I would love to see what that ultimately turns into, because we have seen some improvements being made with particularly companies like Capcom have been starting to catch up to a lot of other studios. We talked a lot about Nintendo in relation to that Disney Illusion Island talk yesterday, because that talk really did a good job of presenting what Nintendo's path to accessibility could be in the future, in that it is such a thin line to go from we are being approachable to people who haven't played a game before, who might be younger or older, to what if we also, have things that are accessibility-wise for disabled people, the ability to not slide down walls during wall jumps, to not have to do timing stuff and things like that. Yeah. Another thing I really liked about that talk, that was true, I think, for a lot of the talks yesterday, was people not being afraid to acknowledge the shortcomings that they still have with regards to accessibility, and the things that we need to improve on this, these are lessons we learned.
Yeah, and it's the ongoing understanding that no game can be 100% accessible, and it's also not possible, and we shouldn't strive for it. It's sort of, I think it was Tara talking about in a later thing that done is better than perfect, and it's such an important thing to do. Understand that if you improve one thing each game, that is one thing each game, and in some couple of time, that will actually add up to be a lot of things. And I think it's also important to understand that you can't be accessible in all the ways, but you have to find what is your pillars of your game, what is your core of your game, and do we want to make this part of the game accessible? We also had the workshop,
Yes, that was Cari Watterton from Rebellion, who absolutely knocked it out the park. Gave a fantastic talk about how to give workshops about accessibility, sort of using internal workshops at Rebellion as an example. And go seek that talk out when it's up on the GAConf YouTube channel. It does a great job of going like, hey, not only here is a practical way of going from here is the basics to here's how to practice putting them into practice, through to here are the specific numbers of what worked and what didn't, and how helpful this is to different groups of people.
And one thing that I like, she used a statistic that I haven't seen before, and I'm really looking forward to read up on it, that it said 33% of all gamers look at themselves as disabled. But we also know that, like, say, a lot of people that are colorblind don't look at themselves as disabled, but they still enjoy the use of accessibility, which shows me that just like how many people actually use accessibility, because if the disabled number is 33%, that's a large number when you factor in everybody who don't look at themselves as disabled. So it was really nice, and just like for our nerdy part, like being actually seeing somebody making a really good presentation inspired to actually do a lot of things. But yeah, so I'm going to go home and rewrite some of my stuff.
There was also a panel that was held about multiplayer video game accessibility, which is a topic I've been really interested in recently. I know I've done some videos on the stuff. That panel was really good in terms of approaching a lot of stuff that I think has been bubbling conversations for a while, but is needed to be more discussed. Things like the back and forth struggle that happens between trying to push cheaters out of cheating in video games versus making sure that disabled players are accommodated, the difficulties that come with things like people being quite nasty online if you are disabled and playing competitive games. And it was really nice to see that sort of community perspective brought forward, I think.
Yeah. I sadly had to take a break during that, but that is like I have to give a shout out to GAConf. They have like a quiet space where you can go for people like me who needs place to like chill. I sadly couldn't see it then because I needed to like stay away, take a break. That is just how it's part of being disabled. But for me and for everybody watching, you can see all these talks online on YouTube, which is what I'm going to do. So the talks I had to go away because I had to take a break, you can just go online to YouTube and just watch them right now. So if there is anything you hear from us talking about and you're just like, this is really, really cool, watch all of our podcasts through and then go and watch the other thing.
Yeah, and on that note, I think it's worth talking about GAConf, that I really appreciate the Discord that they have for people who are viewing remotely in real time, that there is a live community of people talking about the talks, communicating, doing networking, that it's not just here is the live stream and here's a chat that scrolls past. It's good that there is a degree of like, hey, if you're remotely engaging with this, you can still be part of those conversations. There was another talk that happened that was very technical focused, and it was less in the moment helpful for me, but I'm glad it's a resource that's out there, which was about Iris and Fortic, which are two of the EA open source development tools that were made available in their patent pledge earlier this year. Iris is I believe the one that's to do with photosensitivity and trying to check for potential photosensitivity risks. And Fortic is for checking legibility of text in terms of like size and contrast. And it was, considering those are both like command prompt run programs, it's good that there is a resource out there that goes, if you're a bit scared of command prompt, here is how you actually use those programs.
And I think one of the things that is cool is that I might not use it because like I'm not a developer, but I think I want to use it in some parts when I do my reviews of games, because sometimes I have a review and I'm just like, I'm not sure if this is okay or not, so it's good to have a source. And just so people know, this was open source, so you can incorporate it into your own things, which is really, really cool. That means that you can have a program just checking as you go and make things, and you can always be sure to make sure that people are safe. Like, I like the fact that we have that this game can be photosensitive. a warning, but the problem is that that is overused. It's used on everything, so if it's used on everything, you don't know when it's actually needed. And with this, you can actually have a way to actually make it. If you want this really blinking things, give people an option to opt out really early, have people know that really early in your game. Look, preferably not have it, but if it's you have to have it, have a way for people to opt out, and this is a way you can make sure you check it and be really, really safe.
Yeah, I really appreciate as well that they acknowledged that this is not a replacement for having actual humans check whether a piece of media is photosensitive safe. But what I think they acknowledged well is, unfortunately right now, the only real way to test for a lot of media whether it is safe for photosensitive people is to have someone with something like photosensitive epilepsy watch a piece of media and see if it causes them problems. And you have a lot of people doing really great work in the industry doing photosensitivity consulting, but they're putting themselves at risk to do so. And anything you can provide that's a tool that goes, we did at least one pass to try and catch things to minimize the risk when a human checks this, is really important to have.
And it's really important also to understand that it doesn't feel good. Like, you don't know if you have photosensitivity until you have it. So even though you have an option in your game, people might not know that they need that. So technically, please don't add things that is photosensitive. Like, use tools like this and get it away. There are so many creative ways you can go around it, still get similar effects without risking people's literally life. Because this is, when I talk about accessibility, it's a lot of times talking about, oh, can I do this hobby? This is actually talking about you can actually send people to hospital and put them in a danger risk. So please don't add it, and check your games, and give us options out for maybe people that get like nauseous and stuff by the same thing, but it isn't a danger to them.
Yeah, I'm really glad that open source software is available, because I know it's something that, like, when I'm putting together the Accessibility Summer Showcase this year, I'm going to run it through this just as one extra layer of checking that nothing's a potential risk, and it's good that there is something that open source in that regard. After that, we had the Sea of Thieves talk that was about their audio aim assist, which in the room the audio was in mono, so not ideal. But I've seen this implementation before. For anyone who's not aware, Sea of Thieves has a way that you can aim at enemies in game based on audio that sort of ticks faster and faster as you get closer, and it pans left and right so that you can sort of aim towards an enemy and makes a little sound when you lock on. And it was a nice insight into the development of a really good tool for trying to allow more people to get involved in first-person shooters.
And a big shout out to Chris Marlowe in general, the work he's doing on Sea of Thieves, the work that the whole team is doing on Sea of Thieves, and as we had the person holding the talk, is just, you can see that they really care. And that is something with Sea of Thieves. I always have felt like they actually care. They listen to people and they work with people from the community. And that's really, really important to understand, that you need to work with the people who actually will be affected, because then you actually get to check if it actually works. And just in general, it's always a blast seeing anything from Sea of Thieves, because they know what they're doing, and it's really, really impressive.
And much like the Disney Illusion Island talk, I think it was really good that they, again, acknowledged the shortcomings and the things they still have to work on in amongst that. I appreciate that a lot of these games that have been praised for specific elements of accessibility haven't used their talks to go, yes, here's a talk about how great and perfect and never wrong we are. It's no, they acknowledge there is still work to be done, but that doesn't change the fact that what they are doing is really impressive.
Yeah, and I think that is a really nice jump over to Tara's talk. So Tara had this really nice talk about how being an accessibility advocate is like doing the hero's journey. And I'm not going to recap it here, because go and watch the talk yourself. But sort of all the motivation she talked about, it can be draining. Sometimes it can be really, really hard, especially when you get a lot of critique, or you're trying to implement something and it gets cut off the game due to time or money. It's really draining. But have colleagues, talk to people, have like a possibility to go and like let people hear your woes and hear your like your victories. And also she said something really cool, which I'm going to start doing, and that is like putting positive notes in a folder on her computer so she can go back and look at them, because like sometimes it's so easy to just get lost in the negativity and lost in the ever churning fight that is accessibility advocacy. But like understand that you're making a change, so let's actually remember that.
Yeah, that's something I've been doing for a while. I can't praise the idea enough. The having the folder of, even if it's just fairly minor things, the someone had a positive experience because of something I did helped someone in some way, and just keeping those little moments together so you can go, yeah, no, there is a reason why I'm putting this effort in. The other thing I think that she talked about in that talk that's worth particularly highlighting is her discussion of like the abyss, the lowest of the low in the hero's journey, and in relation to doing accessibility work, you've worked really hard on like a feature or an accessibility thing you've really pushed for, or whatever thing it is you've been advocating for in your role in trying to make games better, that you have your moment of that feature you worked on really hard got cut, or that opportunity you were working towards, like the budget just vanished and it didn't happen, and not losing all of the positives that you've managed to do because of that, but not also going, it's okay to feel the pain of that moment, but to not let that overshadow the things you have achieved. But yeah, Tara's talk was really good in that regard. It was a very motivating talk. It was originally going to be the last talk of day 2, and I see why it would have been a really strong way to end the conference.
Yeah.
There was also a talk called Bloody Cheats, which I really enjoyed, which was, again, about a topic that's come up recently, the battle between anti-cheat devices and accessibility, and sort of looking at the history of cheating in games. I really like that sort of historical perspective it had.
And it was so weird seeing this, like all these things from ye olden day when gaming was like in its like start phase. And then the same topics are the same topics we discussed last year. Like, it's nothing new. We have had these battles for years to come. And I think also it was a really good thing of showing, like, sometimes when people say we're doing this to help games not cheat, but actually maybe they're also doing it because of capitalism. And I think that was a really good thing to show. Like, sometimes companies don't have they don't do things in good faith. They actually tell it's for one thing, but it is actually for something else. Of course, there were no actual like example. Nobody got like shouted out, nothing like that. I'm not meaning that, but like in general to say that there are reasons other than just we don't want people to cheat, but also it also highlighted the actually really hard work of like doing this cat and mouse work with like doing something anti-cheat and then the cheater just find new things to do it and so on and so on, but how of almost every time this has happened, the sort of butt of the joke or the biggest loser in the whole thing is the disabled community who ends up not having an accessibility because it's looked at as a cheat when all it was meant to do was to help.
Yeah, there was a particular moment in that talk that really stood out to me, which was the discussion of Vivek Gohil and his modified PS4 controller, and the way that, like, the Chronos Zen, which has recently been sort of banned from use on consoles as a cheating device, was the thing that allowed him to use his modified controller on PS5. And there was a very direct quote from him talking about how absolutely devastating it was when this controller that allowed him to game had allowed him to move to next-gen games, and suddenly losing access to playing PS5 made him really question whether it was worth him fighting to having access to play games. And that story, I think, did so much to really humanize that whole topic.
And I think it's a bit important thing is like we can't get lost in evil, fighting evil, and just we have to remember who we actually are, what is actually the consequence of the thing we add. And it's a really important topic. It's really short, it's 15 minutes or less than that. So I think it's a good thing to just like watch it and learn, because I think it was a really important talk.
Yeah, one other thing about that talk that was really good, and this also came up in the panel about multiplayer gaming, was audio descriptions of gameplay shown during the talk. It was so nice and reassuring to see. Like, there's a few moments throughout the day where I was like, that's what I like to see accessibility-wise. I really like that the Sea of Thieves talk opened with, here is a visual description of me, the speaker, and pronouns given. I'm like, yes.
Oh, we've forgotten one.
Oh, which one?
That is Mollie.
Oh, gosh,
Mollie,
we haven't talked about
Mollie,
Mollie's one.
Mollie did a
So-
really, really good one because she talked about content creating and how, like, if you are going to work with disabled people, you need to be accessible, and it was so good.
I can tell you why I didn't bring up Mollie's. Mollie's isn't in my notes because I was like, no, this is all perfect. I didn't have to make any notes about Mollie's because Mollie was just spot on.
It was so good, and like all these things that is so hard to remember, like if you send a PR package, how heavy is it? Like how big is it? Can you actually open it by yourself? If you send for an event, will there be this extra disability tax, as it's called? Like how often when disabled people, we are traveling, we need to have a lot of extra accommodations, and it like racks up in price, so maybe we can't attend. Is your event hybrid, so people can attend like online? Like really good examples of really good accessible things is like GAConf, of course, that's really been accessible, but also like Able Gamers Gala, who were a gala which everything was online. It was a gala online, and things like this, you can make it accessible, and Mollie had so many good points on that. And of course, like as content creators, we have experienced a lot of this, and I think it was really nice having a room full of developers seeing this, like understanding that accessibility goes outside your own game, and it really inspired me to. I have now pitched a talk for next year. I really hope I get it, so maybe I will be a speaker next year. Let's cross our fingers. So yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, honestly, it was such a good first day of because like this is obviously talking about the talks and things that happened, but like just generally being at the event, it was such a good, positive, uplifting energy this first day. It's so nice being in a room full of people who just get it on accessibility, a room full of people who you don't have to do that beginner's groundwork of explaining why this is important, and we can get into the nuances of, but how are we going to do the important stuff? Like, I'm so excited that we still have a whole other day of this, and I'm sure we will talk about like stuff from day 2 will probably come up in the next episode of this that we do. We're recording this slightly out of order, so this is the first thing we're recording, then we do episode 1 and we'll come back for episode 2. But did you have anything else about day 1 you wanted to talk about while we're here?
Just a shout out to everyone, like we have talked to, people who has just come up, have like these talks. It's been such amazing. I have been so starstruck seeing like developers that have worked on some of my favorite games. It's been so amazing. Been able to talk, as you say, talk to people that understands, and also a really big shout out for GAConf for making this. It's really cool. We need things like this, so really good work. And thank you so much for having us. So
I think my only other ad would be big shout out to all of the university students who came to find out information and to learn and to pick people's brains about stuff. I spoke to so many people yesterday who were like, oh, I'm doing a degree in whatever it is and I want to focus on accessibility and I've come to ask questions. I'm like, this is perfect. You've found a really good source of knowledge on this. So I think that's everything from day 1 of GAConf. Hooray, we got to do a thing in person. We will be back with another regular episode of Ctrl Alt Access next week, and then we've spoiled you at the start here with like this mini episode. We got an episode next week, but we'll be every other week-ish after that. Thank you everyone for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.